Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and this is the 10th episode of the series where I teach you guys how to build the full stack application using React, Node, and MySQL. And I told you guys that I was gonna post this video almost like one after the other, because now I'm almost done with my finals, so I have a lot more time to actually create this video. So in the previous episode, we were able to add some sort of authentication and security system where we are able to store a token in our session storage, and that is passed in every single request, which validates if the user is authenticated or not. And the reason why we wanted to do this is, for example, if we wanted to add a comment, you're only able to add a comment to a post if you are a logged in user, right? An authenticated user. So basically what we want to do in this video is we saved in our token, in our hash token. If I open up my inspect element over here, I'm currently logged in, so we have an access token in our session storage. You can see that this piece of like this string of letters and numbers, this is the hashed, or the it's the token that we created, right? And the payload, the data that we put inside of it, is the let me take a look. It's basically just the it's not over here. It's in my users.js. It's basically the username and the ID, right? So each token stores the username and the ID. So why is that information important? Because we want to use that whenever we make some sort of request, right? So how do we want to keep track of that? How do we want to how can we access these values whenever we make some sort of request? Which, for example, if I'm going to comment something, I might as well add the username for the user, right? Currently, we don't have any usernames. It's just a random comment. But if we want to add a username, so we write here like the user who commented this and give them a username, how are we going to do that? The idea is that we need to insert some sort of column in our comments table in our database over here that will allow us to have that username, right, inside of the comment. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to delete every single current element in our table. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to apply just because we don't have our comments before, they didn't have any how can I say, they didn't have the username, so we have to delete them. Let me just check. Yeah, they don't have any comments. This apparently has comments, which is kind of weird. Oh, I forgot to delete some of the comments. So I'm just gonna delete them. Oh, I forgot to click here, but I'm gonna delete the rows. So I'm gonna click apply, and okay, let me just close this, and now we don't have any comments in our project. So what we want to do is we want to close, first of all, everything here, just so that we have a clean workspace, and we want to open up our models for the comments, because this is our Sequelize model, and we want to add another field, which is going to be the username. So it's just a very simple username field. It's going to be of type data types.string, because the username is a string, and we don't want it to be null. We want only people with usernames to be able to submit a comment. So when we do this, it should automatically, if I refresh the comments table, it should, actually it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this table, this comments table, by clicking on drop table, and let me just click on execute. So it was dropped. Now I'm going to refresh my server. You can see if I save the file, it should restart the server, and Sequelize will automatically create a new table that will satisfy the fields that we added. So let's come over here and refresh all of our tables, and the comments table should be here, as you can see. And if I select this table now, you can see that now we have a username for the user who actually created this. So it's over here, which is amazing. So now that we have this done, what we can do is we can sort of like start writing the code and the logic so that whenever you add a comment, instead of just adding the comment post over here, for example, we're only currently adding the actual comment, but we want to add some stuff. For example, we want to add the username, which isn't currently being sent from the front end. So when there's a field over here saying comment, right? So when you type this, what happens is it only sends an object containing the element, like whatever you wrote inside of here, and the ID of the post, because those are the two pieces of information that we need, right? Post ID and the comment body. And what we want to do now is want to be able to send the username together with this, but we don't want to add any sort of fields. We want this to be done automatically by recognizing which user is logged in. So to do that, all we have to do is we have to come over here to our Auth middleware, because if you recall, this middleware is called whenever this is posted. So whenever you make any requests and it's validated by our token, it's gonna pass through this function, right? So what we can do is when we verify our token over here, this valid token variable now is our payload, it's our data without being hashed. So technically, this over here is the username and the ID that we set to create the token. So for example, if I want to access the username, I can just say const username equal to valid token dot username. So this is basically it. This is the payload, the data that we added in our token, already decrypted in a sense. It's not encrypted, but it's basically the data that we stored in our token. So why is that important? Because since this middleware is executed in every request, we can create request variables inside of this that are accessible in every single request which we pass this middleware. So for example, if I want to create a variable, some sort of variable that stores the user information, I can say rect.user equals to, I don't know, a string like Pedro. Let's just pretend that it's a string and it's a variable, right? I can technically access this in every single endpoint or every single request which we pass this middleware. So for example, I could come over here and say rec.user, and this would be Pedro. So this is the idea. Instead of storing Pedro, we want to store an object containing the valid token. So we're going to store the valid token like this. And what this means is, oh, I accidentally put this. So now, if we want to access the username whenever we make any requests, all we have to do is we have to come over here and say const username is equal to rec.user.username. Because rec.user, now it's an object containing the username and the ID, because valid token it's exactly that. So when we say rec.user.username, we're just storing the username. So why is that important? Because when we create the comment, now we want to add something else. So we're going to destructure this over here. We used to just send comment, but since we're adding a new field to this object that we want to add to our database, we don't want to pass it as just a single object anymore. We want to come over here and say comment dot username. So we're adding the field username to the comment object, and we want to set it equal to username like this. And now this comment object now has a username field which is equal to the username that we got from the authenticated user. And now when we pass this, it should create the comment in our database, in our table, with the username for the user who is logged in. So let's test to see if this is working. Currently we have no comments, as you can see. I'm going to refresh this. But when we try to add a comment, let me say, hey, I really liked this post, and I press add comment. You see it worked, because if it didn't work, it would have sent us a message. And if we go here to our database, you can see that not only we store the comment body, but we also store the username, which is the username for the user who is authenticated, who has a token in its session storage. So that's kind of the idea. Now you might be asking, okay, what if I want to display the username over here? Well, that's very simple. We've dealt with this kind of things before. Now that we have the username field in our database, in our table, all we have to do is we have to go to where we are displaying our comments, which is in the post.js file. And whenever we are displaying our comments, which is kind of over here, as you can see in our list mapping over here, we map through every single element and we get the comment, the specific comment, as an object. So all I have to do if I want to add the username is I just want to come over here and say something like, let me just add a label tag and and say something like username, and then I don't know, comments dot username, because we know that each comment in the comments list includes a username field, because that's what happens here in our database. So if you go over here, you'll see that it has a username and it displays the username PedroTech. Obviously, this looks horrendous, but again, we're not focusing on the UI in this series. I'm going to probably make some changes to the CSS, and the code for that is going to be in the description, but I'm not going to do it in the video. Let's just add some more comments as an example. So let me just say something like, please sub to the channel, and you can see, oh, interesting, so it didn't display a username, and I know exactly why that happened, because this over here is optimistic rendering. So if you recall, this isn't being filled by the database. This is something that we add when we write our comment. But if we refresh the page, the username will be here. So how do we fix this? The reason why that's happening is over here, right? So when we actually have the comment done, we are over here after the response. After we actually add the comment to our database, we are basically just adding the comment to our page, but we don't have the username with us, right? That kind of makes sense, right? So how do we fix that? Well, technically we just have to grab the username from the response, because if we go to our comments route over here, let me go to comments route. If you recall, we're just returning the comment, the full comment that we created down here at the bottom, right? So it includes the comment body, and it also includes the username that we added. So if we want to have access to that username, we can grab it from the response. So let's do this right here. Let's just add a username field to the comment to add object. So username, and say response.data. Probably username. Yeah, username. And now if we refresh our page and we just try to add another comment, you'll see that it will show correctly our username over here, because now it knows which user is submitting the comment. So that's amazing. We got this working, and we can use this in every single request that we want to. Some other things that I want to add in this episode, because it's just small things that we haven't done in the past, because our episodes would have been like a lot bigger, is basically whenever you log in, I want to remove the login and registration buttons from here at the top, right? So how exactly do we do that? Well, one thing we can do is those are being rendered in our component over here. Probably is it on the app page? Yeah, you can see we have a navbar in our app.js, which just renders the buttons, right? So how exactly would we make this work, right? Because we are currently rendering login and registration at all times. So how do we conditionally render this? Because technically this is just over here, and how exactly would we do that? Well, let's think about this. We only want to display these values if we currently aren't authenticated. If in our session storage currently doesn't, there's no sort of token, as you can see over here, right? So technically we just want to display the buttons if there isn't any tokens. So what we can do is we can come over here and we can conditionally render this based on the session storage. So I can say something like this. I'm going to wrap this around with some sort of JavaScript variable and just ask a question. The question will be, well, if there's session storage.get item called access token, then I don't want to display this. So I'll do it like this. I'll just pass this parentheses around here, and I'll wrap this around with a React fragment, because we need to have some sort of fragment around two components. So basically what we're doing is we've got to put a exclamation mark over here to say if there's no variable in the session storage called access token, then we want to display this. If there is, then we don't want to display this. Now, this isn't the correct approach, and the reason why I'm showing this is so that you guys can understand it better, because this is something that I got confused when I tried doing this first. But the reason is, look at this. If I come over here, you'll see that right now there isn't any variables, right? And I'll try to delete the how can I say, the application over here, the token. If I delete the token and I refresh the page, you'll see that it will display. Now let's try logging in with this account. Let me say PedroTech. And let me put my password, and let's click login. Now look at this. How interesting. Our buttons don't disappear, right? Now you might be asking, okay, is our token actually stored? Well, yeah, it is stored. So what is happening? Well, the only way to make this work is if we force some sort of re-render of the page. And we can do this by reloading our page, and it will work. But we don't want to do it like this all the time. No one would like to keep refreshing their page just to show some sort of changes. This is not the most effective way of doing this. Not to mention that, think about this. All we're asking here is if there's any items in our session storage called access token. So technically, any attacker could come over here and imagine we're not authenticated, right? And we just deleted this. Technically, I'll refresh the page, you'll see that the buttons will appear. I can just open my inspect element and run some JavaScript here to pretend that I have some sort of variable in our session storage. So set item, let me just create a variable called access token and just, I don't know, add whatever. This isn't a valid token, but that's all we're asking. And if I refresh my page, you'll see that there isn't anything anymore because we have a fake access token in our session. And that's one part of the scary thing about session storage. But technically, that's one of the negative aspects of this approach. And I'll show you guys how to make this work better. Well, the first thing we might want to do is really think about what kind of storage we're using. So in the previous video, I talked to you guys and I mentioned that we're using our session storage to store our token. But let's think about all the applications a website might have, right? For example, what happens with the session storage, if you're not familiar with the difference between the session storage and the local storage, is that if I log in over here and I, let's just come over here and log in. I'll just put PedroTech and I'll pass the password 123. You'll see that if I refresh my page, I am logged in. There is a token here because the buttons disappear. But if I open a new tab, I close this and just open up localhost 3000, you'll see that we're not logged in anymore. The token disappears, which is kind of weird because if you go to Facebook, for example, or any other website, you'll see that you keep yourself logged in, right? So that's something that we might want to have in our application, and it's just something that you can't do with session storage. The session storage is better for some stuff that is stored whenever you're, how can I say, whenever, like until the window is closed. So if you want to keep it persistent within your application, you will need to use the local storage. And the reason why I showed you guys in the previous video to use the session storage is to emphasize this point now, because a lot of people get confused between the session storage and the local storage. I have separate videos on both of them if you want to check it out. But basically, I would definitely recommend using the local storage for this case because we want to be able to keep ourselves logged in. So that's the first step to keeping ourselves aware of who is logged in or not, because we want to use that later to make it so that this will work perfectly. So to make that change is actually pretty simple. All we have to do is we have to come to where we determine if we're logged, where we create our session storage object, which is in our login.js page. And you can see that over here, we're just setting our item to the session storage. Now, how do you do it to the local storage? It's the same thing, but you change this to local storage. So this is all you have to do. Literally, all the changes you have to do is, it's literally this. And then the second change you have to make is, when we're making a comment, for example, we are passing the session storage token as part of our headers, as you can see. So now instead of saying session storage.getItem, we have to say local storage.getItem. So like over here, I'll also change this to local storage as the final change. And this is all the changes we have to do. And these are all the changes we have to make. So over here, let's refresh our page. You'll see that in our application, session storage, there's nothing. In our local storage, there's just this, which I'm going to delete. And let's log in now. Let's come over here and say PedroTech and put my password 123. Okay, logged in. Let me refresh my page. You'll see that it works now in our local storage instead of our session storage. There is a token, as you can see perfectly. In our session storage, there's nothing. But look at the difference. If I open this and close this and just open my tab again, I keep myself logged in. It's persistent. The only way to delete this it's by basically manually deleting the local storage item, which we can do it later for like kind of a logout button. I can definitely make that in the next video, but this is just a focus for this video. So now we have our variable, our token stored in our local storage. So what do we do so that this will update automatically, right? Because we're still, if I delete this from the local storage, it will still not update perfectly. Like I'll come over here and delete this. And let's just refresh our page. Let's come to login. And then let's just come over here and say PedroTech. Try to log in again. Say password 123 and click on login. You'll see it's still not working because we're not triggering a re-render. So when you hear the word triggering a re-render, what does that remind you of? Just think about it. It kind of reminds you of states, right? Because you want to re-render the page whenever a variable or some sort of data is changed, right? So we need to create some sort of state that represents if we are authenticated or if we are logged in or not. But how are we going to access that state like throughout our whole app? Well, to do that, we're going to do a bit of state management through the context API, which is something that it is extremely important for any React developer to understand. We're not going to use Redux because I really don't like Redux, and I just feel like the context API is a lot easier and a lot more manageable, especially in the beginning. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to create some sort of context variable that is going to hold information about the user, including if the user is authenticated or not. So to create our context variable, we're going to come over here, and I'm actually going to close both of these, and I'm just going to come over here to our React application, and I'm going to create a folder called helpers. I like to do this, totally not necessary for you guys, but I like to keep my project, my folder structure like this, where I have some sort of folder, which inside of it contains some sort of like file related to our context variables. So I'll create a file called auth-context.js, and this is basically the file where we're going to create our context and just export it. A lot of you guys might find this kind of unnecessary to just have a whole file for this, but it's how I like to do it. So this is how I'm going to do it. So inside of here, we're going to import from React the create context import over here, as you can see, and at the bottom we're going to generate our context by saying export const, and we're going to create the auth context like this, auth context, and set it equal to create context, and over here let's just pass an empty string as our initial value. So this, for those who are not familiar with the context API, I have a full video on like how to learn the context API in 12 minutes. But here I'm gonna skim over a bit, but I'm going to explain every single step. And we're just creating our context over here so that we're able to then further define what kind of states we need that are going to be put inside of this context. So over here at the bottom, we're going to come to our app.js, which when you're creating a context variable or a context state, if you want to access that state in whichever components you want to access that state in, you need to create that context state at the highest level component. So in our case, the highest level component is the app.js, and that's where we want to create our context. So over here, we want to be able to come here at the top and like right over here, and we just want to import from our file, so from./helpers /auth context. We want to import the auth context variable that we created, so auth context. And what we want to do is we want to wrap this component over here called auth context as a component around every single route or every single part of our application which we want to have access to that context states, right? So what that means is basically right over here where we have our router, we can just wrap all of this around with an auth context like this. And let's just come over here, which means that every single component, every single page in our application will have access to whichever variables that we pass inside of this context. And in order to make this work, we need to say that this is a context provider like this. And now, if we want to pass any sort of state, any sort of variable that is accessible in every single one of the components below here, which include this over here, this navbar, and also all the pages that we have in our application, we just have to pass them inside of this value property that exists. And what this means is we have to create our state for our application somewhere over here in our highest level component. So I don't usually like to organize when it's a very like well-structured project. I don't like to create states in components such as the app.js, but for simplicity reasons, we're going to create our authentication state that keeps track of our username, our ID, and just the fact that we are authenticated over here. So in order to do that, we're going to import from React the useState hook. So import useState from React. And we want to create that state here at the top. And for now, let's just call it auth state and set auth state. And what we can do is we can use that to keep track of our ID, right? For right now, I don't care that much about keeping track of our username. That if you guys want to put that as part of your state, you can do that. But right now, I just want to keep track of whether we are logged in or not. So I'm gonna actually make this a state, which right now is just a boolean. And initially it will obviously be false, but it's just a boolean checking to see if you're logged in or not. We can change this later to make it into an object containing all the information about the user, but right now we'll just keep it like this. And this state has been created, so if we want to be able to access the value of the state and be able to change this state in any of the components below here, all we have to do is pass both the auth state variable and the set auth state function. And now in any of the components below here, and inside of this auth context, and I forgot to put a dot provider here. So basically, inside of each of the components inside of here, we can access both the function that changes the auth state and the function which changes the, which basically, not the function, the variable which holds the information of our login status, right? Which means that, for example, instead of just asking, okay, if the local storage.get item, if there is some sort of item in our local storage, instead of asking that, we can just ask if not auth state. Which means that if auth state is equal to false, if we're not logged in, then I want to display both of these links. But if we are logged in, then I don't want to display these links. So why is that important? Because take a look at this. Since we passed the set auth state as the value to this provider, we can now access this variable inside of all of our components, including the login component. And that means that when we log in to our application in our pages over here, when we click on this button, we can instead, we can also set the local storage item, but we can also change the state directly from here. And to do that, we have to access our context variable by coming here at the top and importing the use context hook, and also importing the context file that we created. So I'm gonna do something like this: import from /helpers/auth context, and we want to import the auth context like this. And now if I want to access this the function which is able to change the state for our auth state, we just have to do const then say set auth state equals to use context, and then we have to pass the context that we want to grab this value from, and in this case it's the auth context. So this means that we're grabbing this state from here, or the function for the state right over here, and now we can come over here to our whenever we log in and just change set auth state to be equal to true. And this means that now if we come over here and we refresh our page, you can see obviously it's not logged in, right? If I inspect my element over here, you'll see that in our application there's a token, and you guys will see why it's not showing correctly. But I'm gonna delete this token and let's log in. If I come over here and I try to log in, and let's say PedroTech and then password 123, you'll see that now it actually removes it because it is triggering a re-render, because instead of asking if the local storage has some sort of variable inside of it, it will automatically change it because we're changing a state. So now in our navbar, it's saying, okay, auth state now changed its value. It's now actually true, so we won't display the login link and the registration link. Now, why, if I refresh this page, it still shows it? So we kind of inverted the issue. Previously, if we refresh the page, it wasn't showing, but the problem was that if you don't refresh the page, it was still showing, and now we just inverted everything. Well, the reason for that is because every time we refresh the page, the state, auth state, initializes as false, right? That's straight up something that happens, and it only changes to true if you click on the login button. So how do we check to see if this should be true? Well, to do that, all we have to do is we need to use the use effect hook. So come over here and say use effect, and we're gonna trigger this use effect hook like this, and it's just a function that is gonna render. It's gonna run immediately when you open your web page, and we only want it to render once when you open this page. And what we want it to do is basically inside of here, we're just gonna ask, okay, if there's something in our local storage, so if local storage.get item is access token, so if we want to grab the access token and there's something, then we want to set auth state equal to true. If there isn't, then we don't want that to happen. So if we refresh the page, you see that it works because immediately when we refresh the page, the use effect function is called, and it makes this check over here, which is perfect. Now as a last resort to make this more secure. And I know we've been taking a long time to just make this minor thing work, but it's important because we'll help you guys understand a lot better the whole aspect of this. Like, this small thing helps understand everything about like our authentication process, right? So the last thing we have to do is we have to account for the fact that I mentioned before that if you actually just come over here, delete this token, refresh the page, obviously it doesn't work. But if I just added a fake token, like, let me just come to the local storage and add a fake token, and you'll see that it recognizes it as a token, which it shouldn't be something we do. So how do we account for this? This shouldn't be happening, right? We shouldn't be able to accept fake tokens. So to do that, pretty simple. All we have to do is we need to create an endpoint in our application, and this endpoint will be basically very similar to what we've done so far, but it's gonna be over here in our users route. So I'm just gonna open up my users route. Let me just close everything here, even the app.js. Let's just open our backend. And in our users route, we're gonna have a final endpoint over here, which is just going to be checking to see if there is a valid token or not. It sounds dumb, but it's just a route. So router.get, and we just want to get /auth. Let's call it /auth, and we just want to get some sort of information regarding if the user is authenticated or not. So let's just say res and create a function, and obviously we want to pass the validate token middleware over here. What do we call it? Wait a second. Oh, we actually didn't import this at the top. So let's import this over here. Let's just come here and import from, not like this. I'm just going to say const equals to require, and then we're going to import from the middlewares folder, and then auth middleware, and we want to import the validate token middleware, and we want to pass this over here. And all this is going to do is it's going to run through this and return back if it is valid or not. So technically, we're going to come over here and just return back res.json, the rack.user if we want to. So we're just returning back the user, basically. And this endpoint will just serve to check to see if we're authenticated or not. So it's going to make all the checks. And now, since we created this, all we have to do is we have to come to our frontend, again, in our app.js if we want to. And in our use effect, instead of just checking to see if the local storage has any token, which, again, can pretty easily be faked just by putting some random token, we're actually going to make a request. We're going to come over here and say Axios. We're going to import Axios. So import Axios from Axios, and we're gonna make a request to the slash. Let me just say HTTP localhost 3001 slash. Did I call it users? I don't remember. Let me come to the login page just to see it. Yeah, I called it /auth. Oh, damn it. So I called it /auth, and then the actual route, I called it auth again. If you want to change that, you can change that, but I won't change that. It's just going to be /auth again. Sorry if you're confused. If you have any questions about this, just write down below. It's just that the route for logging in and for user information is called auth, and then I, for example, called it auth again. So this is just some dumb stuff, but basically this is what we're doing. And at the end, if this doesn't return any error, we're going to grab the response like this. And if there's any errors, so if response.data.error is something that exists, then we want to keep set auth equal to false. So we're going to say set auth equal to false. But else, so I'm going to do it like this. Just put an if else. So else, we want to copy this and just put it inside of here. So all we're doing is we're making a request to our localhost 3001 /auth endpoint, the one we just created over here. And then if there's any errors in the response, and the reason why there might be any errors in the response is because, if you recall, in our middleware, if the user is not authenticated, if the middleware doesn't recognize the token, then it will return back as a JSON some object containing error. So if there is some object containing error, we know that it wasn't valid. So we automatically just set it equal to false, else we set it equal to true. And all we have to do now is just pass the headers, right? Because we need to pass the token over here to make sure that it is working. So to do that, let's just open an object over here, pass headers like we did before, and from the headers we're going to pass some access token, and the access token will be the token that we have in our local storage. So access token like this, and now this should be working. Let's come over here. I'm going to refresh my page. Let's check to see if everything is working. Let me actually go to my, we don't have any tokens. So I'm going to log in over here. And let's just log in with PedroTech. Then put a password. Password 123. Then click login. You'll see we're now logged in. Perfect. It changed perfectly. But let's take a look in our inspect element. Let's go to our network and see what happens when I refresh my page. If I refresh my page, you see the links don't appear. Why they don't appear? It's because we made a network request, an API request to the Auth endpoint. It returns back the token, like unhashed, not unhashed, but like it returns back the data, and it returns a success. But if we tried doing it differently, if we tried faking our token, and I delete this, and then I just create a fake token, you'll see that if I refresh this, the links appear. But if I create a fake token, you'll see that even if I refresh this, the token doesn't work because it's not valid. So that was kind of like what I was planning to do in this video. I know in broader terms, we haven't made a lot of changes. We've done some cool stuff, like we were able to add a username to each post. We don't even need to write our username. It automatically recognizes which user is actually writing the comment. And we were able to create this small like feature where the navbar disappears the login and registration buttons without having to, like, when you log in. And it seems minor, but we were able to set up a lot of stuff for later on in the next episodes, right? Because now we have a context variable that is able to hold if you're logged in or not, and we're able to use our information from our token in our front end because we received the username right when we write the comment. So that means we're able to decode our token and actually use it in our front end, which is some things that you guys asked me to do in the comments. So in the next episodes, we're going to be doing a lot more. This is basically it for this episode. I don't even know if it was long, but yeah, that's basically it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. I'm really enjoying doing this series, so I really want to continue it. I'm thinking maybe there's like 2 to 3 more episodes, and the reason for that is because I don't want to keep this series like extremely long, but the next episodes, each episode is going to be 30 minutes to 40 minutes long, right? So we're going to put a lot of context into it. And if you've reached this where we are right now, I definitely think that you guys are already prepared for a lot of stuff, already prepared for bigger projects, because what we're doing here is complicated stuff in React. We're able to build a whole full stack application which incorporates every single small skill that you might need as a full stack developer. So later on in the series, what I really wanted to implement is being able to like a post, which is something that I find interesting, and also be able to deploy this application. Also, if you have any comments, like any ideas of what you want to see in one of the episodes, just let me know down below. But this is one of the 2 things that I want to do. I want to be able to add some liking system and also be able to deploy this and teach you guys how to deploy this application so that anyone can access it around the world. So that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting 3 times a week, and it will massively help the channel grow. So I would really appreciate it. And yeah, that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.